back to Custodes Central with another video coming at you about the Blade Champion, threat ranges and managing risk. So as you all know, you'll be excited to hear that the faction now has access to advance and charge. So we get martial inspiration. When the model's leading a unit, you can reroll the advance and the charge roll made for the unit, and once per battle, you can advance and charge. Legacy of Combat gives you a free heroic intervention. Just keep in mind that heroic interventions change from 9th to 10th. So now this is only targetable when you're going to heroic intervene into a target unit that has made a charge this turn. It's not kind of like the old Space Marine 6-inch heroic whenever you want, wherever you want, kind of stratagem from before, where you can kind of initiate combats when the opponent hasn't made a charge. So this is kind of a bigger deal than it was in 9th edition, because obviously the CP premium of the CP reroll is much higher. You don't start with tons of CP anymore. Depending on your list, everybody just starts with a very low amount of CP, so you have to use them very carefully, and having access to kind of a reroll on the advance and the charge is actually pretty powerful. So let's have a look at some math here. First of all, credit to Thomas from the Canhammer Discord. Canhammer is another YouTube channel covering Adeptus Custodes. It's run by Darren. He's got a really cool community on Discord called the Canhammer Discord. I'll definitely try and remember to put a link to his channel, and maybe the Discord if the link works, as a permanent link, so you can come and join us. This is where all the really cool Custodes players hang out on Discord. It's got loads of really good players, so you should definitely check it out. Anyway, so onto the table. On the left hand side, we've got a table where all the charges are rerolled unless you make the charge that you want to make, and on the right you've got the same thing without rerolling for the charge. These numbers here, they're all expressed as percentages. The green highlights are the best numbers, and these columns here on the rerolls are when would you actually reroll. So this column here, you don't reroll the advance. Here you reroll if you get a 1. Here you reroll if you get a 1 or a 2. Here you reroll if you get 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. So one of the most interesting kind of things is when you get to reroll your advance and your charge roll, you're actually slightly better off keeping an advance roll of a 3. Mathematically, you would think you would reroll the 3, but it turns out you're very, very marginally better off keeping a 3 when you try to make an advance and charge roll of 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. It doesn't matter massively. Basically, how we got these numbers is I thought that would be a really cool way to math it. Turns out the math was actually pretty hard. That's why I ran to Thomas and was like, can you help with this? He ran a brute force simulation of, I think, 10,000 rolls per result. So I don't know if this is like mathematically proven, but it should be close enough to, for a Warhammer game, basically. So as you can see, what this means is we've actually got like a 89% likelihood of making 10 on the advance and charge roll, right? And that gives you a 16-inch threat radius from deployment, right? Because you're going to move your 6, you're going to do your advance, and you're going to do your charge. So this now gives you 89% of making a 16-inch kind of charge from deployment wherever your Blade Champion unit is deployed. This is pretty good. And if we want to go to even higher percentages, you've got 95% of making 15 inches, and so on and so forth. You can go down here. So I don't know exactly where your cutoff would be for what you would consider reliable. I'd probably put it around 10 inches here. If you're even safer than that, you could go to 9. And down to about here. This is speculative, but it's pretty interesting. You can make like a 21-inch, including your movement, for 24% for making a 21-inch from deployment. This is massive. This is like this is almost all of no man's land, depending on your deployment strata. Now, on the other side, you can see what happens if we don't get to reroll the charge, but you might want to just reroll the advance. And so the numbers are they're not like night and day, for example, right? Unless you get to the very big numbers. But one thing that you should be able to see is if we compare when you should be rerolling the advance versus rerolling the charge, you can actually compare it here, because on this column we're rerolling the charge, but we're not rerolling the advance. And you'll see that these numbers in this column are higher than these green numbers. All right, so typically you're always better off rerolling the charge rather than rolling the advance. So this is not relevant to the Blade Champion because you get to do them both for free, but this is just it's a bit of math hammer for people who care about statistics and stuff like that. One thing to note is, obviously when we're trying to make very, very long charges, you wouldn't use this binary ruling of, we only re-roll 5s and 6s here, we only re-roll 6s here, we only re-roll 4, 5, 6s, because obviously if you're trying to make an 18, you actually just need a 6, you'd re-roll everything. But the way that the simulation was run, as I understand it, we had to use some binary rules on that. But that's the kind of takeaways from here. Now, what's the TLDR from all of this is basically you're generally better off re-rolling the charge than re-rolling the advanced roll if it's not on a blade captain, and you should typically keep an advanced roll of a 3 sometimes if you're trying to go between 6 and 9 on your advance and your charge roll. It's only very, very minimal change. You can see when you look at the differences, it's very, very minor, but if you're like a uber min maxer, this is some interesting stuff to keep in mind. And from this, you should work backwards from here. So let's say I think that the good number to use is 10. So you've now got 16 inches from wherever your blade champion unit is deployed to threaten from deployment, right? So what I think will be really interesting is if we look at some deployments and where you can get to. Obviously, this is going to depend on your terrain because you obviously want to deploy out of line of sight. And if you have access to a land raider as a transport, because now you get to take into account your 3-inch disembark. It might be a bit of a pain with the large models and where they can actually disembark because you can't disembark in the clipping a ruin, for example. But you can now work this out. So let's see if I can actually do a transition in post and take you to TTS. So I'm back. We're now going to look at some deployments using TTS. The way that the deployments were described in the leaks that I have seen, it wasn't super easy to figure out all the distances, so I'm just going to rely on what the TTS map makers have done here, and I'm just going to assume that they're pretty correct. So if we look at the hammer and anvil deployment, the green area here that you can see, this will be our deployment zone, and these are the objective markers. The objective markers are slightly bigger than they should be in the rules, because these look to be 7.4 instead of 6, because they should be 3 inches from the center. But what this means is that we'll be able to cover the objectives 15 inches from our deployment zone. Obviously, you're going to have to keep in mind whether there's terrain that allows you to deploy in the area safely out of line of sight, or if you're using something like a land raider, just remember to add kind of 3 inches because of your 3-inch disembark, which will give you kind of a longer threat radius from deployment. That matters. So hammer and anvil, 15 inches is looking to cover everything from deployment. So and remember, you're like 89% to make 16 inches. So you could be an inch back and you could cover this 89% of the time with your blade champion. So let's have a look at Dawn of War. This looks very similar. 15 inches, 15 inches, 15 inches. And again, this is dependent on, your deployment and your terrain. So when you look at the terrain on deployment, you have to think, okay, is this something that I want to be able to cover with my blade champion? And if so, you should think about deploying that unit there instead of something else and figuring out later on that, oh, actually, you don't have enough space to deploy your blade champion unit there. Let's have a look at one more. This is sweeping engagement. This one looks a bit weird. It looks like it's on a slight tilt. So one of them looks like it's 14 inches away. One of them looks like it's only 13 inches away because of the slight tilt of the table. I'm not sure if that's intentional, but this is still pretty within the ranges that we want to be looking at. If we go into search and destroy, we're in the green bit again. So obviously this is just an auto from almost anything. Your close one, your close objective, looks like it's 15 away, but your far one looks like it's kind of 19 away. And 19 is a bit far, so you may not want to rely on being able to cover this on turn 1 if you happen to go second and they decide to put something on there. And the last one is Crucible of Battle. This looks like it's 16 inches for all of them, maybe 15 actually. 15, 16, something like that. Obviously, you're probably not going to have terrain that allows you to park right here. You might have to start here, for example, and obviously this will make your threat ranges different, probably until players kind of get a bit better at the game and used to kind of your threat ranges. They probably won't tow just on the end. They're more likely to park, an inch or so into the objective to get a few more models onto there, for example. But what this does mean is that on turn one, we've got very good coverage if we happen to go second. Anyway, I hope that's been very helpful in getting slight advantages turn one in terms of deployment, in terms of understanding your threat range and how reliable these kind of distances are, because these are good numbers, I think. Anyway, so hopefully that's been helpful. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and visit Dan's Canhammer channel on YouTube and the Discord if you can, and come and say hello. All right, thank you very much.